everyone, I'm Sreeshna and I lead InMobi's integrated marketing efforts in the region. Over the last 45 minutes, we've been discussing the most crucial trends that will define the Indian advertising ecosystem. Yet, there's one theme that we haven't touched so far, and that is the massive unicorn boom led by digital native brands in India. In 2011, InMobi was the first and only unicorn in the country. 11 years later, we're not as lonely, as there were 43 Indian unicorns minted in 2021. As these digital native brands enter a phase of hypergrowth, today we're in conversation with someone who's been observing these developments from extremely close quarters. Hi Navin, it's great to have you. Could you please share a quick introduction of yourself and then we'll get started?
Thanks, Sreeshna. It's amazing to be here as someone who's had a vantage point and been looking at the startup ecosystem boom over the last many years. As a quick introduction, I'm Navin Madhavan, VP and GM of Growth Platforms at InMobi. I've spent over 8 years here, and it's been truly amazing to see the evolution of the ecosystem both in India and globally over this time. More than the number of 40 unicorns itself, what is truly interesting to me is the categories that India has come up with in terms of innovation in the last few years. Just in the consumer side, we have unicorns spanning fintech, crypto, social commerce, entertainment, and so on. And at the same time, in the last few years, we've seen India becoming the hub for B2B SaaS, delivering magnificent results for enterprises across all of their needs, marketing, finance, operations, and so on. As someone who's really had the opportunity to sit by and see this ecosystem grow, I'm really looking forward to what this means for all of us, not just as a partner, but as a consumer, because this has definitely made my life easier. With many of these new brands really delivering experiences on digital mediums, I think performance marketing is something that's going to become interesting this year, and we're going to see it take many interesting shapes as we go forward. To deliver growth, every digital native brand that we're seeing growing has to master the art of performance marketing, which is the balance of delivering the highest lifetime value at the lowest customer acquisition cost in a consistent and predictable fashion. Given that there is no real secret potion or magic formula to do this, I know that every marketer in the country and globally is spending most of their time experimenting to identify the right creatives, channels, and strategies that work for their brand at different points in time in their life cycle.
Great. So I think, I mean, you've really set some incredible context. And like what you said, I think at the very end, just that articulation of the challenge that marketers face today, and especially performance marketers, right? What do you think they're like, and what is really on the mind of performance marketers today?
Yeah, I think what we've seen with the growth of the mobile app ecosystem is that there is no easy answer to growth. What marketers and brands are discovering is that the number of options, and by options I mean channels, medias, platforms that they have to invest into for growth, is really very high. This means that the ease of measuring the outcomes is not as straightforward as what it was previously. It's not just the channels, it's the granularity of data that each of these channels bring forward too. That means that the uncertainty is quite high. Of course, the biggest benefit of digital marketing is that there is very easy measurement of ROI, that is the return on investment, and that's what determines the life of every marketer, and that's the metric that their CFO and CEO are chasing them consistently on. I think the biggest challenge that we are faced with in a market like India, where on an average at least 20 plus channels are being experimented with by every performance marketer, is to figure out how to measure marketing ROI in a clean, simple, and consistent fashion. And this is very important because without this, their lives today are extremely complex, and they're really struggling to grapple with the numerous data sets that's available in front of them on a daily basis. At least to me, this is what I think is going to be the biggest challenge that is currently being solved for across brands and platforms alike.
Got it. And I think you touched a little bit about, sort of the unique challenges in India, but do you find that they're the same challenges across the globe, or does it, sort of vary as you go from region to region?
The answer, as always, is that it depends. I would say that it's not just it's not something which is very specific to regions. I would actually categorize it as a mix of regions and the life cycle of the brand in which the marketer is involved in. There are certain commonalities in the sense that there are evolved markets or brands themselves that have moved on from chasing hypergrowth. Hypergrowth is a phase where you're just looking for massive customer adoption and looking at doing that through either paid marketing or through growth strategies that are different, that could be organic in nature. Today, such evolved markets and brands, including those in say North America or Europe, or even markets like Australia and Japan, are really looking to drive engagement and higher lifetime value on an existing customer base that they've already acquired in the past. This means that it's not about necessarily just driving growth. It's about driving growth in the right fashion and also measuring growth in the form of different cohorts. And by cohorts, I mean looking at how users who've acquired 7 days before are behaving differently from those that have been acquired 30 days before or 90 days before. Hence, measuring your loyal users, your new users, your repeat users, and likely different phases of life cycle both for the user and the brand to make sure that you're delivering the right marketing strategy across each cohorts. That I think is the story that we're seeing happen in evolved markets and brands in developing markets that have reached that stage as well, which basically means that they've acquired significant scale. Now, coming to the newer brands, many of the unicorns that I think we were just previously speaking about, for them who are especially focusing on developing markets, the priority is always hypergrowth, right? You've promised big numbers, you have a large market to go after, and it's important for you to capture attention in a market that's extremely, attention hungry, and they could be easily distracted to other options as well. Hence, for a brand like this, it's important to make sure that you're identifying growth at the right cost through the right channels. This means that you have to iterate, you have to experiment, and you have to nail down the successful ones on an ongoing basis for driving sustained growth. I think the other big challenge that is yet to happen or surface in India is the change that happened in the last year, that is 2021, with the changes that Apple introduced by deprecating IDFA, which is the constant identifier for doing digital marketing in the ecosystem. This means that data that was previously very deterministic has now become slightly more difficult to track and predict. With users having the option to opt in, it's become important for marketers to evolve their marketing to work with an ability to predict and model likely outcomes basis whatever limited data sets that are available with them. Um, it's important because privacy is really becoming a factor across the ecosystem, both for brands and for players in the ecosystem. So it's easy to brush it away saying India is not an iOS heavy market, but we really need to watch out for what that really means in terms of long term implications.
That's great. I think, you spoke about the more mature markets and what they've been focusing on, but I'd also really like to talk about, the hyper growth markets that you mentioned, and more specifically in India. I think we are in the age of a mobile first boom. And of course, that brings incredible opportunities as well as challenges. So I'd really love to hear your take on that as well.
Yeah, I think it's quite obvious today, and it goes unsaid that if you're a digital native brand, you're truly a mobile first brand, right? We're no longer in an era where, I think it is quite stale to say that you have to think of a mobile first strategy. Your digital strategy is mobile first, and it's quite an accepted reality and truth amongst all digital native brands in India today, be it groceries, be it fintech, or any other new industry that we're looking at. True disruption is happening through your smartphones. Think about groceries being delivered in less than 10 minutes, credit cards being activated entirely via an app that you're installing. Everything is being made simpler for users through their smartphones. Numbers aside, I think we've seen that numbers of unicorns aside, if you look at the number of apps and volume of apps being downloaded both on the Android Play Store and iOS App Store, India tops the charts consistently on a monthly basis. An Indian app has been the number one app that is being downloaded. Just that the app itself changes depending upon the category and the interest of users at that point. But India has been at the forefront of the app economy boom globally. So what this means is that every marketer who's working on a digital native brand is trying to make sure that they're capturing the attention of the users. And for that, it's important that they nail down their performance marketing strategy right. As much as virality and organic users kick in, you have to make sure that you are in front of the users and you're doing it in a measurable and consistent fashion. And that's where performance marketing kicks in. What is quite interesting about India is that unlike what I would think is the case in other markets, Your media channels are not restricted to the big walled gardens such as like a Google, Facebook, or even someone like a Snapchat or a TikTok, which are not as popular or large as the first two in India. There are other options across media opportunities, which include all of your OTT platforms that are now truly mobile first. We've seen how Netflix has truly adopted a strategy which is unique just for India, because that's how smartphone first India is in terms of consumptions. And you have large publishers. By publishers, I mean app developers who are truly delivering simple utilities to Indian users. That could be, someone like a Truecaller, or even the fintech apps who are powering UPI across a phone pay or a Google Pay, all of which are enabling advertising today to reach out to users. This means that an advertiser not only has to look at the big walled gardens, independent media publications, or OTT or utility apps, they also have to look at platforms like us, who are DSPs and ad networks who are enabling advertisers to buy inventory programmatically. That means that in terms of complexity, an Indian performance marketer's life is likely the toughest in the world, because that's something that's just going to keep happening. We are going to see more such options evolve, and they need to be smart and nimble enough to operate with this complexity. And I think the last and important one that I would like to bring back is that it's not just Apple and Google who are being concerned about privacy. Um, as recent as a couple of weeks back, the data privacy bill has been tabled in the Indian Parliament, and that has implications for the economy, for the smartphone economy, in terms of how people have to implement regulations and what kind of data is being shared and accessed by the user, by every brand from their users. We've seen that this has happened globally. GDPR was just the start. We've seen countries across Middle East and Vietnam starting to operate with these principles, and this means that we have to watch out for how global trends are evolving to make sure that we are ready as an ecosystem when it happens. You don't want to be caught unaware, because this is today accepted globally, and we have enough learnings from our counterparts globally to pick up and execute.
Got it. Got it. I mean, definitely incredibly exciting times for the performance marketers who are really, in the driver's seat when it comes to the growth that these brands are facing. So, I do want to sort of, ask you a question on, what do you think is lacking in the current solutions in the market, and why do you think it's important for, for marketers to have the right data in an accessible fashion?
Yeah. See, this is an interesting one because marketers today, like I mentioned, are toying with the idea of spending on digital channels, spending on television, spending on other offline channels, which end up helping them drive their growth, right? At least on digital, I've spoken about the nature of complexity, because of the fact that there are multiple channels, and each of these channels have different nomenclature and data sets on the back of which they operate. It is not easy for a marketer to bring this data together. And at the kind of complexity and scale of budgets that we're talking about, in the range of crores of rupees, it's important to make sure you have accurate data, because like I was telling earlier, the reason why a CFO loves a performance marketer is because they can measure the return on investment easily. For every other channel, there is always some uncertainty around the fact that it can be done through an NPS, it can be done through a share of voice, and so on. Hence, um, instead of relying on spreadsheets, emails, and fragmented data sets, which is the current solution today, um, you need to be able to do something better, right? Because the challenge of having these solutions is that you are likely relying on the fact that either an individual is able to put it together, or that the underlying platforms themselves are giving you the accurate data, or the fact that your finance team and you are referring to inconsistent sets of data, which leads to more questions in that sense. That's the reason why it's important for every performance marketer to have their data in a very simple and accessible fashion. Because lacking that, you're actually taking decisions on incorrect data, and that will have long term implications on how your growth is actually being driven.
Got it, got it. And I'm going to bring this a little bit closer home, and I want to understand from you, what do you think InMobi is doing, in terms of actually solving some of these problems in 2022?
We always want to solve the problems that makes the life of our customers, which is importantly performance marketers, easy, right? And I think we've been trying to do different things over the many years. What happened in 2021 was that we saw how the ecosystem has been evolving, and how the lives of some of our clients have truly become ridiculously complex. As a result, we considered investing into a platform and an opportunity which could end up solving for some of these problems. For those of you who did notice, we acquired a company called Appsumo, which is a UK-based analytics platform, whose primary goal is to make the life of performance marketers globally fairly simple and not complicated. It's a small startup that's been working out of UK with a large number of existing clients globally. And I think the interesting thing is that they are a platform that already has pre-built integrations with 100 plus channels. And by channels, I mean media channels, DSPs, trackers, and analytics through which every marketer today is tracking and measuring their marketing performance. The intent of AppSumer is to ensure that we can automate your daily view of marketing spends in a seamless fashion once you sign up for this platform and start using it on a daily basis. I think what we found interesting and what we hope more people in India can also start experiencing is the ability to build customized dashboards on AppSumer to solve for the need of each brand and each team uniquely. Because I think it's important that we as a platform understand that it's not the same metrics that a fintech brand cares for or from a gaming or from media and from like say e-commerce. Each vertical looks at data differently, each vertical looks at cohorts differently, each vertical measures ROI differently. Hence it's important that we are able to customize these dashboards. And this is not just in categories, right? Even within an organization, um, different teams could be tracking different metrics. For the marketing team, it could just be about how the channels are doing. Whereas for the finance team, it could be about the cost. And for the product team, it could be about how adoption is changing with new features being rolled out. Hence, AppSumo brings the ability to bring in pre-configured dashboards for each user in the same platform. And we will hopefully make that a single source of truth for different teams across every organization to refer to, thus making your daily stand-ups easier because all of you are operating on the same data and your decisions are becoming far more faster. Of course, I think the simple thing that I have to be honest about is that in India, there is typically a tendency to put on an analyst or an intern who can go behind this with getting spreadsheets and emails configured to their respective leaders. But I think brands need to recognize the fact that individuals can keep up with the speed of platforms only so much. Individuals may not be as easy for them to figure out when Google changed an API or Facebook's data is now coming in a different format, or one particular platform's data has not been updated and is stale. Hence, relying on platforms that can simplify your life is something that is important for every brand to consider investing into. And that is not just something in the context of AppSumer. And to be fully honest, I think brands in India need to evaluate beyond AppSumer alone. There are similar competitors of ours who could solve for similar problems, and you need to invest into doing that because otherwise your life is just becoming unnecessarily complex when there are tools that can really change the way in which you operate. I think they already have clients both in gaming, finance, e-commerce, and other categories in different parts of the world, and hence there is enough interesting success that we've seen in different parts of the world. What I'm truly excited for is bringing them to India and making sure that they can fuel the growth of many brands in India and removing the bottlenecks that existing in the decision making process for marketing today. I hope that we get more brands live on this through 2022. And hopefully, the vision that we've set out to it, which is to simplify the life of performance marketing teams, ends up being a reality by the end of the year.
Great, great. Definitely a lot of very exciting things that you have in store for 2022. Thanks so much, Naveen, for taking the time to speak with us today on this incredibly exciting topic. With that, we come to the end of the Building Resilient Brands event today. I want to just thank all of you for attending the session. I hope you all had a great time. We had some really insightful discussions today. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us at mobilemarketing@inmobi.com. We'll have somebody put that up in the chat box so you can reach out to us there. And of course, you can also connect with all of us on LinkedIn and ask your questions. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today, and stay safe, and hope everyone has an amazing year ahead.